Have you ever wondered why certain people seem to pull you in instantly, almost like gravity, while others leave you completely untouched? Attraction feels natural, spontaneous, even mysterious, but Carl Jung believed it's never just random. According to Jung, our deepest desires are not only about beauty, chemistry, or charm. They are tied to something hidden, the unconscious mind. Often, the people we find irresistible reflect our shadow, the parts of ourselves we suppress, deny, or secretly long to reclaim. That's why attraction can feel so intense, even overwhelming, because it isn't only about the other person. It's about us. It's about what our unconscious is trying to reveal. So what is this shadow side of desire? And how can understanding it transform the way we see love, relationships, and even ourselves? Today, we're exploring Carl Jung's deeper truth about sexual attraction. When we experience powerful attraction, it can feel almost magical, like fate has intervened or the universe is pulling us towards someone. We often describe it as chemistry, a spark that can't be explained. But Carl Jung would argue that this overwhelming sense of attraction isn't always what we think it is. In fact, it's often not love at all, it's projection. Projection is when we unconsciously place parts of ourselves onto another person. According to Jung, our minds are not fully conscious. We carry hidden qualities, desires, fears, potentials, that we suppress, deny, or simply don't recognize in ourselves. These unacknowledged parts of us are what Jung called the shadow. And when we meet someone who seems to embody these hidden traits, we project them onto that person, often without realizing it. This is why attraction can feel so intense, even overwhelming. It's not just about who they are, it's about what they represent to us. The qualities we've buried within ourselves suddenly appear before us in another person, and the pull is magnetic. Jung described this dynamic in terms of the Anima and Animus, the inner feminine within men, and the inner masculine within women. These archetypal figures live in the unconscious, shaping our desires and influencing whom we find attractive. When we encounter someone who mirrors these inner figures, the attraction feels larger than life. But here's the catch, that intensity can be misleading. What we're really falling for is not the actual person, but our own unconscious qualities reflected back at us. In other words, we're falling in love with a part of ourselves we haven't yet integrated. This explains why some of the strongest attractions can also be the most confusing, short-lived, or even destructive. We mistake projection for genuine love. True love, Jung suggested, comes after the projection fades. Once we see the other person as they really are, not just as a mirror of our shadow or anima/animus, only then can authentic connection begin. That's why many relationships that start with fiery passion eventually collapse. The initial attraction was never love, but projection. This doesn't mean attraction is meaningless. In fact, Jung believed it serves an important purpose. Projection can act like a guide, showing us the hidden aspects of ourselves we need to acknowledge. For example, if a man who suppresses his sensitivity finds himself drawn to a deeply empathetic woman, that attraction may be pointing him toward the neglected emotional side of his own psyche. The same is true for women who deny their assertiveness and feel drawn to strong, decisive men. The attraction reveals what they, too, carry inside. So the next time you feel that instant spark, it's worth pausing before calling it love. Ask yourself, what is it about this person that feels so magnetic? Do they represent a part of me that I've ignored or rejected? By reflecting on these questions, we begin to see that attraction is not just about the other person. It's a mirror. A message from our unconscious. And while it may not always be love, it can be an invitation to deeper self-understanding, and to a more authentic kind of connection. Have you ever noticed how you keep being drawn to the same kind of person, even when it always ends badly? The faces may change, the circumstances may shift, but the emotional pattern feels eerily familiar. Jung, and many later psychologists, would say this is no accident. Very often, we don't fall for the person standing in front of us. We fall for the wound they awaken inside us. Intense attraction frequently mirrors unresolved childhood wounds, feelings of neglect, rejection, or not receiving the love we needed. The psyche has a curious way of trying to heal itself. When something from our past remains unhealed, the unconscious seeks opportunities to bring it to the surface again. It does this by drawing us toward people who resemble, in some symbolic way, those who hurt us or failed us when we were young. This pattern is known as repetition compulsion. It's the tendency to unconsciously repeat old painful dynamics in the hope of finally fixing them. On the surface, it feels like love, chemistry, destiny. But underneath, it's the psyche trying to rewrite a story that began long ago. Imagine a child who grew up with an emotionally distant parent. As an adult, they may feel inexplicably attracted to partners who are cold, detached, or unavailable. Why? Because some part of their unconscious is still seeking the affection that parent withheld. They believe, on a deep psychological level, if I can finally make this person love me, it will heal the wound I've carried since childhood. The attraction feels magnetic because it isn't just about the present moment, it's tied to unfinished business from the past. But here's the problem: the unconscious doesn't distinguish between past and present. By choosing partners who mirror our old wounds, we often end up reliving the very pain we're trying to escape. Instead of healing, the cycle deepens. That's why repetition compulsion is so powerful and so destructive. Jung emphasized that the key to breaking this cycle is awareness. If we can recognize that our overwhelming attraction may be less about love and more about a wound, we begin to take back our power. We stop asking another person to heal what only we can heal within ourselves. This doesn't mean that every relationship is doomed to repeat the past. Rather, it means that relationships can serve as mirrors, reflecting the inner work we still need to do. When we understand this dynamic, attraction becomes less of a trap and more of an opportunity. If someone stirs up old wounds in us, instead of blindly chasing the connection, we can ask, what in me is still hurting? What am I unconsciously trying to fix? True love begins when we stop using others as stand-ins for our unresolved pain. By tending to our own wounds, through reflection, self-compassion, or even therapy, we free ourselves from the compulsion to repeat them. Only then can attraction grow into something real, not the pursuit of healing through another person, but the creation of a relationship built on authenticity, wholeness, and mutual respect. So the next time you feel an irresistible pull towards someone, pause and look closer. Sometimes, you're not falling for the person, you're falling for the wound. And by seeing that clearly, you take the first step toward breaking the cycle. One of the most confusing aspects of attraction is how often we find ourselves drawn to the so-called wrong person. Maybe they're toxic, emotionally unavailable, manipulative, or simply not good for us. And yet, instead of pushing us away, something about them feels magnetic, even irresistible. Jung and modern psychology would tell us that this attraction is not a mystery, it's a reflection of unresolved pain. The body and mind have an uncanny way of confusing familiarity with safety. From an evolutionary perspective, what feels familiar feels survivable. Even if it's unhealthy, it's something we know how to endure. This is why so many people find themselves repeatedly pulled toward relationships that echo their early experiences of neglect, rejection, or chaos. It doesn't feel safe in a rational sense, but it feels like home to the unconscious. Think of it this way: if a child grows up with love that is inconsistent, sometimes present, sometimes withheld, that child learns that love is unpredictable. As an adult, when they encounter someone who gives affection one moment and withdraws the next, the body lights up with recognition. This feels right, the nervous system says. But it isn't right, it's just familiar. The pull isn't chemistry. It's trauma reenacting itself. Jung often wrote about how the unconscious shapes our choices until we bring it into awareness. Until you make the unconscious conscious, he said, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In relationships, this means that unless we recognize the patterns at work, we will keep gravitating toward the same kinds of people, those who mirror our unresolved wounds. We call it chemistry, destiny, or soulmate energy, when in reality, it's a deep psychological habit. This is why the wrong person often feels more exciting than the right one. A stable, kind, emotionally healthy partner may feel boring or uninteresting at first, because they don't awaken the familiar charge of old pain. By contrast, someone toxic can feel electrifying, because they activate that unresolved wound. It isn't true love, it's a trauma bond. The challenge is learning to distinguish between chemistry that's rooted in trauma and connection that's rooted in genuine compatibility. This takes self-awareness and, often, a willingness to step outside our comfort zone. If love has always been associated with struggle or pain, then real love, gentle, consistent, supportive, will initially feel uncomfortable. Paradoxically, what feels safe may feel unsafe, and what feels unsafe may feel like home. Breaking this cycle begins with recognizing the pattern. When you feel that magnetic pull towards someone who is unavailable or toxic, pause and ask, do I truly love this person, or am I just drawn to what feels familiar? By naming it, you create space for choice. You no longer have to be unconsciously driven by old wounds. The truth is, the wrong person feels familiar because they awaken the echoes of our past. But once we see that clearly, we can choose differently. We can learn that love doesn't have to feel like pain, and that home can be something safe, nurturing, and real. Attraction is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. It can bring people together, create intimacy, and spark a sense of connection that feels larger than life. But what many people don't realize is that attraction can also be manipulated. Sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, people can learn to weaponize attraction, using it not as a bridge to real love, but as a tool for control. How does this happen? Some people develop a keen sensitivity to what others long for. They pick up on unmet needs, hidden desires, or old wounds. Instead of showing up authentically, they mirror those needs back. They become the perfect fantasy, the dream partner who finally provides what you've been craving. If you've been starved of attention, they shower you with it. If you've longed for safety, they present themselves as your protector. If you've always wanted to feel special, they make you believe you're the only one. At first, it feels magical, like you've finally found your missing piece. But what you're experiencing isn't real love. It's an illusion carefully crafted by projection. You're not connecting with their authentic self, you're connecting with the role they're playing. And once you're emotionally invested, once that fantasy takes hold, the dynamic shifts. What felt like love begins to reveal itself as obsession, dependency, or even control. It's important to understand that not everyone who does this is malicious. Many people mirror others without even realizing it. They've learned, perhaps from childhood, that becoming what someone else wants is the way to secure affection or safety. But the result is the same, the relationship is built on illusion, not authenticity. The danger is that when attraction is weaponized, it traps you. You may feel addicted to the connection, unable to let go even when you sense something is off. That's because you're not just attached to the person, you're attached to the unmet needs they seem to fulfill. The lesson here is to be cautious when attraction feels too perfect, too instant, or too good to be true. Real love unfolds slowly, as two people reveal their authentic selves. If someone seems to complete you right away, it may not be love, it may be your wounds being reflected back to you. True connection isn't about fantasy. It's about seeing and being seen for who you really are. Anything less is an illusion, and sometimes, a weapon. One of the hardest parts of love and attraction is learning to tell the difference between genuine connection and unconscious projection. When projection takes over, we don't really see the other person, we see a reflection of our own unmet needs, wounds, or fantasies. It feels powerful, magnetic, and often impossible to resist, but it rarely leads to lasting fulfillment. So how can you tell if you're caught in projection? The first sign is addiction. You feel hooked on someone even though you know, deep down, they're not good for you. No matter how much pain the relationship brings, you can't walk away. This isn't love, it's your unconscious clinging to the hope that this person will finally heal an old wound. The second sign is repetition. You notice you're drawn to the same kind of person over and over again. The details may differ, but the pattern is always the same: unavailable partners, chaotic relationships, or toxic dynamics. This isn't coincidence, it's your psyche replaying unfinished stories, trying to resolve what was never healed in the past. The third sign is confusing intensity with intimacy. When you're in projection, love feels extreme. The highs are euphoric, the lows are devastating. You might even mistake drama and passion for proof that the connection is real. But true intimacy doesn't thrive on emotional extremes, it grows in steadiness, honesty, and vulnerability. The fourth sign is boredom in healthy love. When someone is kind, reliable, and emotionally safe, you might feel restless or uninterested. But when someone is inconsistent or unavailable, you feel alive. This happens because your nervous system equates chaos with love, it's what feels familiar. Real safety feels boring until you heal the wounds that taught you love must be unpredictable. Recognizing these signs is not about shame, it's about awareness. Jung believed that once you make the unconscious conscious, you stop being controlled by it. When you realize you're projecting, you reclaim your freedom, you stop asking another person to carry your shadow, and you start seeing them as they truly are. Projection is powerful, but it isn't permanent. Once you identify the signs, you can step out of the cycle and into relationships rooted in truth, not illusion. If attraction can trap us in projections and old wounds, how do we break free? Carl Jung believed the solution lies in one of his most important ideas: individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming whole, integrating the hidden, unconscious parts of ourselves into the light of awareness. It means acknowledging the shadow, all the desires, fears, and patterns we've denied or repressed. Instead of projecting those qualities onto others, we learn to see and accept them as our own. Why is this so important for love? Because until you integrate your shadow, you're not really choosing your partners, your wounds are choosing them for you. The magnetic pull you feel often comes from unfinished business, not genuine compatibility. It feels like destiny, but it's really repetition. Jung taught that real love only becomes possible once projection fades. In other words, when you stop seeing the other person as a mirror of your unconscious, you can finally see them as they truly are. That's when authentic connection begins, when you're not seeking someone to complete you, but meeting them as a whole person. Attraction after individuation feels different. It doesn't have the addictive highs and crushing lows of projection. Instead, it feels calm, safe, and grounding. The spark is still there, but it's steady rather than chaotic. It doesn't consume you, it supports you. This kind of attraction comes from wholeness, not lack. Of course, individuation is not a quick fix, it's a lifelong journey. It requires reflection, honesty, and often the courage to face uncomfortable truths about yourself. But every step you take toward self-awareness frees you from unconscious patterns. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy, or chaos with love. The paradox is this: the less you need someone to heal your wounds, the more capable you are of real love. When you're no longer driven by unconscious need, you can finally choose freely, and in that freedom, relationships stop being cycles of repetition and become opportunities for growth, depth, and genuine intimacy. Individuation is the way out of projection and the way into love that is real. At the heart of all this lies a truth that can feel uncomfortable, even painful, to accept: you don't attract what you want, you attract what you haven't healed. We like to think attraction is about choice, about consciously seeking the qualities we desire in a partner. But Jung's work reminds us that the unconscious has far more influence than we realize. Until we face the unresolved parts of ourselves, our shadow, we are guided less by freedom and more by unfinished stories. That's why so many people feel stuck in repeating cycles, falling for the same type of person, reliving the same heartbreak, or chasing intensity that always ends in disappointment. It isn't because they don't know what they want, it's because their unconscious is still steering the ship. Their wounds are making the choices for them. Think of your psyche as a mirror. If the mirror is cracked by unhealed pain, every relationship reflects those cracks. No matter how different the person may seem at first, eventually, the old pattern surfaces, because the pattern lives within you. Jung called this, making the unconscious conscious. Until that happens, he warned, the unconscious will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The good news is that healing changes everything. When you begin to acknowledge your shadow, your fears of rejection, your longing for validation, your buried shame, you stop unconsciously projecting them onto others. You no longer look for someone to fix your wounds, because you've begun the work of tending to them yourself. And something shifts. Attraction no longer pulls you toward chaos or trauma. Instead, it becomes grounded, clear, and free. You stop mistaking obsession for love. You stop confusing volatility with passion. The people you feel drawn to are no longer mirrors of your pain, but reflections of your wholeness. This is the deepest truth. Until you face your shadow, your love life will be ruled by unfinished stories. You'll keep replaying the past, seeking closure in relationships that can never give it. But the moment you choose healing, through self-awareness, shadow work, or simply the courage to see your patterns, you take back your power. Love then becomes something entirely different. It is no longer about filling what's missing in you. It's about meeting another person as an equal, whole to whole, soul to soul. Attraction from this place feels steady, safe, and liberating. It is no longer a prison of compulsion, but a choice rooted in freedom. So the next time you feel that magnetic pull, pause and ask yourself, is this my wound calling, or is this my wholeness speaking? The answer to that question may be the difference between repeating the past and finally stepping into the kind of love that lasts. Because in the end, the deepest truth is this: you don't attract from desire alone, you attract from the state of your soul. Heal that, and everything changes. If this video helped you see attraction in a new light, don't forget to hit the like button. It really supports the channel. Subscribe for more deep dives into Jungian psychology, relationships, and self-discovery, and let me know in the comments, which point spoke to you the most. Your reflections could help someone else on their journey. Remember, true love begins with healing yourself. When you face your shadow, you stop repeating the past and start creating a future rooted in wholeness. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep growing, keep reflecting, and keep walking the path inward.